The off week is over. The Buckeyes are back to the grind, and so are we. The Podcast Daily is ready. Ohio State, Maryland, a massive, humongous, incredible showdown on Saturday. Two unbeaten teams. Cannot wait. Welcome. I hope if you have a case of the Mondays, we've got the cure. It's Ohio State and Maryland. That's Bill Landis. I'm Austin Ward. Bill, how was the off week for you?
The off week was good. Still, there have been past off weeks where I've just sat in my house and watched football all day, and I did not quite do that this weekend. Certainly caught up on things, caught the end of the Notre Dame Duke game on Saturday night. But, you and I were down in Grove City doing some wheeling and dealing with the Cards. That was a nice time, nice way to spend the Saturday. So it was nice. It was refreshing. I enjoyed it. How about you?
Yeah, it was wonderful. It did kind of feel like we were still treating it like an actual game week because we did not watch football from noon until midnight. Enough that we can gather a little bit of information about how Ohio State might fit in the national landscape after 5 weeks, or 6 if you count week 0. Looking at some of those top-ranked teams, and obviously watching Notre Dame bouncing back late to get a win at Duke. A great game there, a great finish. And then it's funny to try and project how teams fit in at the end of September going into October in this race, because the thing I hear more than anything from people that I watched games with, that we talked to on Saturday, continuing those conversations on Sunday, was like, there's no great team. There's no dominant team in college football. And I think that that's probably true, but part of me also thinks that Ohio State has the best chance to become that.
It's an interesting point, and it's definitely not one that I disagree with. I could have said that more positively. I agree with you.
You don't have to.
No, I do. I said I agree with you in the most negative way possible, so I wanted to switch it up. If you look at across the country, right, there are dominant units on either side of the ball, and this is something that Doug Maurice and I are talking about on the Kings of the North episode that'll be in your feeds later on Monday. We're looking at it from a northern perspective, but I think across the country it's true too. Like, you feel really good about Alabama's defense, you feel really good about Washington's offense. I don't know if there's any team you feel really good about them on both sides of the ball, but when you think of the fact that you probably do and should feel good about where Ohio State is defensively right now, and trust the track record of Ohio State to morph into the kind of offense we expect from them. Will it look exactly like all of Ryan Day's previous offenses? No, probably not. Can it be more explosive and efficient than it has been? Yes. Has it shown signs that it is getting there? Probably. I wouldn't say that all the way just yet, but if you're confident in that too, I wouldn't blame you because of the track record. So if you combine those two things together, then yeah, I think you'd have to think that Ohio State has at least as good a shot as anybody else in the running to find that kind of balance on both sides of the ball that makes them dangerous.
I think it's that defensive growth through 4 games for Ohio State, especially when you're thinking about how that matches up with the other teams that are going to be in playoff contention for me. And again, one Saturday where they don't play, and Michigan playing Nebraska, or Penn State struggling a little bit with Northwestern, or Texas doing whatever they did for 2 quarters or 2.5 quarters with Kansas. Like, how informative is that, especially if you're talking about such a small sample size? I don't know, but it's impossible for me not to think about it in that prism for Ohio State. And I think the difference right now is that they have such an old school championship formula going, and it's different. So if there has to be some recalibration, maybe that's fair for what an Ohio State win looks like. But if you can win with really good defense and 8.5 points per game, probably pretty good, right? And what you're talking about is also on the come. If Kyle McCord continues to grow week over week, which it seems like he has, I think on the whole he outplayed Sam Hartman in Notre Dame, or at Notre Dame in South Bend. The numbers would have looked, they're not great. They certainly would have looked better if Emeka Egbuka doesn't drop the touchdown, like all those things that we talked about throughout the off week. Even just counting the fourth quarter comeback drive, like that was pretty impressive. And Sam Hartman did that on Saturday at Duke, the same way that Kyle McCord did that the week before. So if that continues, and then you think, well, okay, they may not be a 45, 48 point per game machine. The possibility still exists when you have the weapons they have. But if you're building around a defense as good as what Ohio State has shown so far, that's going to be pretty dangerous when you look at this landscape that may or may not have truly great dominant teams starting at the top with Georgia.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't know that you need to be averaging what Ohio State has traditionally averaged for them to achieve their goals if their defense is going to be this good. And we'll see, right? I do think maybe the jury's still out a little bit on the defense. They've not played an offense that I think can really challenge them via explosive plays in the passing game consistently. Like that's what Western Kentucky wants to do. How capable were they of actually doing it with sort of like one guy to do it to you with is maybe a fair question. And Notre Dame I just don't think is really built that way. Notre Dame wants to run the ball, they can throw it through the tight ends, but they're not going to threaten you on the outside. So we need to, it's a box that needs to be checked, at least I think, for Ohio State's defense still is what's going to happen when you pass a quarter or when you play a quarterback who is going to throw the ball aggressively to weapons on the outside who can conceivably hurt you. And Maryland, I think, is a version of that. It's not the best version of that, I don't think, but it'll be a nice test, I think, to get more answers to those kind of questions. But I'm confident in that group. I'm very confident in that group. And if I'm questioning anything about Ohio State's defense, and I'm not really questioning much at all, it's certainly not the secondary play. Like I think their secondary is going to be really good and continue to be really good this year. So I'm excited to watch it, but I'm not concerned about the test that's coming up against Maryland. But it'll be good to see that come and if it looks the way I think it's going to look, then I think you feel all the more better about the way the defense is trending. And you just want to see the offense continue to find its footing. The one thing with the offense that I guess it's not concern so much as like curiosity, as they're really trying to strike this balance thing in terms of play calling and run and pass. And I do think they probably just need to lean into letting the thing fly a little more. And maybe if you look at the ways they were most successful against Notre Dame, they're like, it was when they would look like an air raid offense. So I don't think that's a bad way to lean if you're Ryan Day and Brian Hartline and Justin Fry and everybody else in that brain trust moving forward. As you try to figure out exactly what the right way of operation is for this offense now that you have 4 games under your belt and you've had a week to kind of digest all of that. I am very curious to see how they come out against Maryland and how they try to do things, because if they start leaning in to the pass more, I would be very encouraged by that and believe that they can get on the path that we're talking about.
Do you think that's a possibility this week, Bill? Because we talked about it a little, and I'm going to merge that with a question that we got on Saturday with Home Breaks that was about sort of the toughness thing and the Lou Holtz and all this. Like my theory was, okay, bleh, you got it all out. Ryan Day got to say all those things about how tough they were. They won this game. Everybody watched. He said it. And then you can move on and like be the best version of Ohio State maybe moving forward without thinking about how people are going to judge them. How realistic is that, do you think? I mean, this is not a new problem, if you want to call it that, with the toughness and the Marty McFly, chicken stuff and all, you're not strong enough to win by running it down somebody's throat. Also, I say, who cares? Like, that doesn't matter. You should not worry about that. Do you think that this is just the Achilles heel, or is the other part right? Like, okay, well, now you've said it, you've done it, everybody saw it, you drew attention to it, it's done now. Now you can go back and you can, throw some short passes to Emeka Egbuka in the red zone and score touchdowns.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a question I have in my mind as well. I don't think Ryan Day will be trying to prove any kind of point here with these next couple of games. It'll be interesting to see how they approach the Penn State game later in the month, because those are the kind of games where they do tend to revert back to a little bit of ball control, a little bit of run the football some more. So maybe I'm setting myself up to get duped by them throwing around the yard the next 2 weeks, and that's not actually what this offense is going to be when those games come around. But yeah, there's a possibility that I guess they get lulled into proving that for the remainder of the season. I don't think I'm necessarily concerned about that. But I mean, it happened against Notre Dame, so I guess you could be. I wouldn't fault anybody for feeling that way. But I think the fact that the thing they did best against Notre Dame was like throwing the ball on third down. They won a game in a 2-minute drill by spreading Notre Dame out and throwing 4 verts for 15 plays to get down the field and then line up the score on the 1-yard touchdown run. I would hope that leads them down what I believe anyway is the right path for this offense. And we've seen this passing game in Brian Day's previous seasons. There have been points during the year where like it just seems like some rocket fuel gets injected to that passing game and it really takes off and it's like deadly for the rest of the year. And I do think we could be setting ourselves up for that.
Yeah, I think there were things about that drive as well. Like that's a wild tangent to get down, but like it sometimes feels like we only see Ohio State's best passing game concepts on 3rd and 4th down. Like, is there something that would stop Ryan Day and Brian Hartline from clearing everybody out and running a drag for Julian Fleming on 1st down? I mean,
no, not that I'm aware of. No, yeah, it's a good, like, I thought, Ryan Day said something after the game against Notre Dame that like I have been sort of hanging on to, and like I wasn't there. I listened to his post-game press conference and I ignored all the Lou Holtz stuff and like listened to the actual football things he was talking about, which was few and far between. But he was asked about Kyle being so good on 3rd down as opposed to some of the inefficiencies, I guess, relative to that on 1st and 2nd down. And he mentioned like taking a closer look at some of the concepts that were running on those plays. And a lot of those early down throws to me were like the sort of like staple hard play action 2-man route kind of stuff that like Notre Dame just seemed like they were ready for all the time. Every time Ohio State tried to do it, Notre Dame was ready for it because they're a well-coached defense and they have good athletes too. So does that then lead Ryan Day to not necessarily abandon that stuff, but maybe become a little less reliant on it, tweak it somehow? And I don't know what that looked like. I'm not a passing game coordinator, but I think we know the kind of plays, right? If you watch Ohio State play, you know the kind of plays that they try to get those big hits on, and they just weren't working against Notre Dame. And then when they did the shorter stuff and the simpler stuff, probably it looked a little better. So does that mean that they start leaning on that stuff moving forward? I don't know, but I did think it was interesting that he was talking sort of conceptually about the way they were trying to attack Notre Dame and how some of it didn't work.
All right, so coming out of the off week, and you have the AP poll, Bill. Who's the biggest fraud in there? Yeah. I know you talk about that a little bit or a lot on Kings of the North. So Georgia stayed number 1. I don't really, other than what they accomplished for the last 2 years, I don't really know what they've accomplished at this point, even at 5-0, to make them number 1. Saturday was probably the most impressive that Michigan has been all year. I still, it's fair to put them at number 2. I don't really understand it. The biggest fraud, without question, is Texas at number 3 for me. At least Ohio State is 4th ahead of Florida State, which makes some sense. But the polls, again, they don't matter, and we try not to talk about them a lot on the podcast daily. But and I don't blame anybody. I don't know what you're supposed to do because we can pick flaws in every single team.
Yep.
But for me, the answer to that question is Texas. I don't get it.
I will say maybe and this is not at the top of the poll kind of thing. Maybe the thing I was most surprised by this week was Maryland not being ranked. They're the first team out at number 26. But
so I said that last week. I'm going to jump in real quick. Sorry, Bill. Somebody said that to me last week when I said, I don't understand why they're not already in there. And they're like, well, look at Maryland's strength of schedule. And before playing Indiana, it was like in the Sagarin, I did look. Thank you for suggesting that to me, whoever you were. They were 155. And I thought, how is that even possible? But they were. And Indiana, I didn't look at it on Sunday. It probably didn't change it a whole lot. So we do not know a ton about Maryland, but still winning 5-0 to get to week 6 usually gets you in the top 25.
Right. That's a good, I want to look up their strength of schedule now. If it's updated anyway. So they're let's see, 132. So they did move up a little bit.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. How do you do that? Mike Locksley, great scheduler.
Yeah, it's impressive when there are fewer than that teams.
They're 130 FBS
in
teams.
FBS. Yeah.
What?
They're 24th in the Sagarin ratings, actually. Not that matters because we're not in the BCS era. It's a good point about their schedule. I just thought they might be there, and this will be a ranked on ranked game and help Fox out a little bit. But it's big noon anyway. As it pertains to the top of the poll, like, I don't know. I guess it would depend on whether or not you lean more on resume or like a power rating style. Either way, Georgia being number one with an overwhelming share of the first place votes at 35. I like, it's just crazy and like lazy, and you don't move them because they haven't lost yet. When like Michigan has looked better, albeit against a weak schedule. Texas is unbeaten with a win at Alabama. Ohio State is unbeaten with a win at Notre Dame. Florida State is unbeaten with the win against Clemson on a neutral site, and at Clemson and against LSU on a neutral site. Penn State is unbeaten, probably against a better schedule or similar schedule at least. Washington is unbeaten and has looked dominant in all but one game. It's odd to me. So I would put Georgia, I think, at the top of that list. They recruit better than anyone or have. And I guess I don't want to fall into the trap of underestimating the team that has probably the best on paper talent in college football, but I don't see them as a dominant team on either side of the ball, and certainly don't see them as the number one team in the country. What have they done to earn it this year? Nothing. So they would be my fraud right now.
I love that. Get a little spicy on the podcast daily for Monday. Yeah. I want to bring it back to something that you mentioned earlier in terms of Ohio State tests this week in Maryland. So we know that their schedule strength is low. Mm-hmm. We know when they tend to come to the Horseshoe, it gets pretty ugly. They've played some really thrilling games in College Park, and Tua Tito played a really great game there last year to make for a back and forth combative affair that kind of stressed our coverage a little bit late into the fourth quarter. Is that possible again this week, or what do you expect from the Maryland Challenge?
I don't think that's well. I guess it's possible because if Ohio State is still figuring stuff out, and some of the line movement, I guess, indicates that people think it's going to be a closer game. It opens as 3 touchdowns, and now I think it's like 18, maybe even lower than that. I haven't checked. The times that it has gotten weird with Maryland has been like late in the year at Maryland, when it's like a good recipe for a sort of look ahead situation for Ohio State. That's not the case here. It's in Columbus. It's in the middle of the season. Ohio State fresh off an off week. I think looking to build upon what they're hoping is a program or season defining win, I guess I should say, at Notre Dame. So I'm expecting Ohio State to come out looking pretty good. I can't remember. Has Ryan Day typically been good off a bye week?
Yes.
Yeah,
but
right. He's
not really last year. Things got wonky the first half compared to the second half, but they don't generally struggle coming off of the off week, and they tend to look pretty good.
Right. So I think it's going to look more like the lopsided Maryland contest. If we were in the second or third week in November and going to College Park, I think I'd feel differently. But I think at the moment Maryland has Ohio State's full attention, and when that tends to happen, Ohio State tends to win handily.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I expect later in the week maybe that number will move back the other direction. We'll see. That's a conversation for the betting show, and that will be on Thursday later in the week, and hopefully they can just get some tutty props up real quick for us so that we don't have to stress on Thursday afternoon for that show. And maybe, Bill, maybe you can make some money this week. I don't know.
I'll settle for one correct pick, because even we didn't do a show this week, but I went on the record saying I thought Notre Dame was going to lose, and I was wrong. So even my fake bets on the away from the show have been wrong. So whatever I say, don't listen to me.
It almost feels like your bold predictions are better than your actual bets at this point, and that's not what you want to be doing.
Definitely not. No, I want the real world predictions that have money involved to be more correct, please. That'd be great.
All right, that will be a part of the coverage on Thursday later on this week. Back at it, full go, snap judgments, Buckeye Q, Roosters later on Monday. It's all coming this week. Ready to get back at it. A massive game against Maryland Saturday. It's getting the full big noon treatment. We'll have all of our coverage on the podcast all week leading up to it. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for joining us to get your Monday started with the podcast daily. He's Bill Landis. I'm Austin Ward. We'll talk to you later.